Hello, and welcome to God in Our City, the Daily Edition. Your host and Bible teacher is Pastor Dave Watson. Pastor Dave has been the pastor of Calvary Chapel on Staten Island for 35 years. In addition, he is the co-founder and president of the New York Institute for Biblical Studies. To receive a special downloadable gift from Pastor Dave, please go to calvarychapelsi.org/GIOC. That's calvarychapelsi.org/GIOC. Now here's Pastor Dave and our show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to God in Our City, the Daily Edition. And this is a special Daily Edition because it's Inauguration Day. It's January 20th, 2025. By law, at noon today, we inaugurate our presidents. They take their oath of office. And I have a very special guest who'll be with me in just a moment to talk about all things regarding that. Before we get to him, we like to give away something free every day here on God in Our City, the Daily Edition. By the way, I am Pastor Dave Watson. I'm the one Allie introduced. I have the privilege of being the pastor of Calvary Chapel on Staten Island. But in terms of free things today, if you just go to calvarychapelsi.org/GIOC, you can download free a sermon I recently preached on the Lord's Prayer. It was well received. I didn't say anything heretical, and I am sure it will be a blessing to you. So just go to calvarychapelsi.org/GIOC to pick that up. And while you're there, please consider making a donation to God in Our City. This is a local church sponsored program, but we need your help to be here on the air, not just for a few weeks or a few months, but for a few years. So if you are able to give a gift, we'd appreciate it. Every gift is appreciated and is tax deductible. If you're able to give a gift of $50 or more, those of you who are part of our church family know we've been reading through the book 21 Keys to Answered Prayer. This is day 15 in our 21 days, and you should be on chapter 15. But this book, written by my friend Dave Early, if you're able to give us $50 or more, we will send you that book immediately. If you're able to give us $100 or more, as our way of saying thanks, we'll send you not just the book, but this beautiful leather-bound New Testament. We call it our God in Our City New Testament. Has our logo engraved right on it, and we know it'll be a blessing. It has Psalms and Proverbs in it. It's the best ESV New Testament I could find. I looked for a couple of years for myself, and I know that will be a blessing to you. So, hey, enough with me. Let's bring in my very, very special guest, none other than Kevin McCullough. Welcome, Kevin.
Hey, Dave. It's good to see you.
It's good to be seen. Kevin is the host, the producer of the That Kevin Show, heard every weekday, 3 p.m., WMCA 570, and across a lot of other markets. And then on the weekends at 9 p.m., you can catch That Kevin Show across the Salem networks. I think you're on Pluto TV and Samsung TV and across a lot of those platforms.
Yeah, 300 radio stations with Salem Radio Network and many, many television networks carrying the new Salem News Channel product. And we are very happy to end your week. We try to do it with a smile. We try to have a little bit of humor. I happen to know that a certain pastor from Calvary Chapel tunes in every now and then and catches some of it. But we try to have a little bit of fun about the week, and we try to talk about important issues that are facing our families and what we're dealing with and how we can make a difference in the world. So it's a lot of fun, and I encourage people to come check it out.
I can tell you from firsthand experience, folks, it's substantive and it's very entertaining.
Well, that's the goal. The goal is to not kill you with a good time. So.
Well, Kevin, I was thinking about you, and you predicted Trump's electoral count almost perfectly, didn't you?
I got one state wrong. I put Virginia in his column. I said that Virginia was going to be very close, and that I thought it was going to tip towards Trump, and it tipped towards Kamala. It is very close. But that was the only thing I got wrong. I got all the other states right, and I was not surprised. The things that I kind of felt and saw on the ground turned out to be real, and the nation had a very strong message to send to Washington, D.C., and that is that they didn't want to have the same types of things that they've had for the last 4 years, and they felt like that the administration previous to the one that they had was the one they wanted to go in the direction of. So that's what happened, and as of earlier today, President Trump put his hand on the Bible and he swore before God and man that he would do all that he could to protect our Constitution. And as he goes forward, already today, I believe the number is in the hundreds,
Yes.
executive orders that he's already signed that are going to radically move the country in a different direction in terms of what the executive branch is able to do. And as you saw, even prior to him being inaugurated, the Congress has already been seated, and they have already passed bills that are awaiting his signature tomorrow on his first full day on the job. So there's a lot that needs to be done, but there's a lot that's already underway, and I'm encouraged. I think we're headed in a positive direction.
I think the country in general feels a little bit of a weight lifted from them. May not be as much here in New York and New Jersey, but across the country, I feel like the nation is taking a breath and saying, government is not going to be as involved in my life.
Well, let me just even mildly push back on that. There was not a county, and there are 3,800 plus counties in the United States. There was not a county that Trump did not get more votes in than he had gotten in either of his presidential elections previously.
That's amazing.
And there was not a single county that Kamala Harris got any more votes than Joe Biden did in any county across the country. And there were several counties that she lost that Joe Biden had won. So in terms of, I mean, people like to look at the map and they say that's a blue state and that's a red state. But if you look at the county map, we're a center right to right leaning country across the board. And with the exception of some really, really hardened blue small areas like sections of Manhattan and sections of San Francisco and some of those places, we are a common sense country that wants generally center to center right leadership. And when leftism lets us down, we go even more to the right. And that's what happened in this election. We were not wanting the woke ideology in our schools anymore. We were not wanting the crime that illegal immigration has visited upon us. And really, in some ways, some of our most vulnerable communities were the ones that were hit hardest by the immigration issue. And we want to have a sense of control that our economy is not spinning out of whack. And we need to bring these wars and these conflicts that are sucking up lots of national resources and lots of human life. We need to bring those to an end. Russia's lost 700,000 casualties to severe injury and death in the war in Ukraine. 700,000.
And to his credit, Trump has said over and over again, people are dying. People are being maimed. This is not something that's played out on a video game. This is real people. And he's also said that the beautiful cities in Ukraine, it will take years, if not decades.
Well, the West is going to swoop into Ukraine and help them a lot once the fighting stops. Russia is going to be a different story because Putin has really put himself in a very difficult corner. When you've injured or killed 700,000 of your fighting forces, and you have basically been doing that on the back of your energy production as a country, and Trump comes along and says, well, we're not going to leave the energy markets alone. We're going to open up energy supplies in the US. That puts him on an economic shallow footing.
Yes.
and he's already got a bad PR footing with his people. I don't know what happens in Russia, but it's not going to be an idyllic world 5 years after the war fighting has stopped. Ukraine is going to have a lot of investment coming in, particularly from the West, that are going to be interested in helping them, and they're going to open up more so to the West. I don't think they become a NATO member, but I think that the idea of aligning with the West is going to be something that they're going to do more readily. And that's just that one conflict. When you look at even the final few hours of the Biden administration, that deal with Hamas and Israel does not happen, except that Trump and his transition team put enormous pressure on Iran to tell Hamas to give the hostages back. Without that pressure, that deal would not have been done, and that's why Biden couldn't get it done for 477 days, something like that. And so things were already starting to improve even before Trump was inaugurated, and now that he is, expect that kind of pace to continue. He's not there to twiddle his thumbs or to dawdle. He's not going to go on ice cream breaks or hit the beach. The president is showing up for work, and he knows he's got a big job in front of him.
We live in such a unique country. You spoke about the fact that Trump will put his hand on a Bible and swear to protect us. That doesn't happen in most of the rest of the world. The transfer of power is not anything like that. This is, I think we not every country, but many nations, it's there's no choice. Here's the guy who's running. Oh, by the way, he won. Nobody voted for him, but he won. It's a monarchy, or it's a coup. We're blessed people, no?
Oh, I think so. And I think that from our founding, the founders wanted to acknowledge that God had been gracious to us. And that's why you have so much of God infused in our early documents, talking about divine rights, talking about rights that come from him and not from one another. We view what we call human rights very differently, at least historically, in our documents, than a lot of other countries do. And I think that we need to be careful to remember that.
Yes.
Because as Abraham Lincoln said, when asked if God was on his side of the Civil War, he responded by saying, "I'm not nearly as concerned as to whether or not God is on my side. My prayer is that our country is on God's side." That's the view that we have had at times in our history. That's the view that we need to have more often. And I'm not saying that any or all presidents do it perfectly, certainly not. But I think that there's an enormous burden that when the men that get elected president, and thus far we've only had men presidents, so don't send me emails.
Not your fault.
But I think that when they assume that office, there is a different level of weight that they just feel with
every day,
every decision that they make, every decision throughout every day that they're there, because basically whatever they decide is going to impact people around the globe. Whatever military actions they take, families are going to lose loved ones. There's always a risk. There's always pain and loss involved in that. So I haven't seen any of the presidents, even the ones I've most virulently disagreed with, that I think ever took the job as just a lark. It's a serious task, and it brings about a sobriety and a seriousness within the people that do the job, hopefully, that is something that we should be thankful for, that we should be appreciative of. I disagreed with Joe Biden and Barack Obama 10%, if that's a percentage, on almost everything policy-wise. But I prayed for them.
Absolutely.
Because I knew the job that they had was bigger than them.
Much bigger.
And they need us to pray for them, regardless of which party they come from, because the job is always bigger than them. Trump is probably, if you look at his first term at least, he faced unprecedented challenges. He's probably the most capable president we've had in the modern era. I mean, I think he probably outpaces Reagan in terms of accomplishment, particularly in one term. But even he will acknowledge that even though he sleeps 4 hours a night and works 20 hours a day, that the job is too big for just him. So they need us to pray for them. They need us to hold them up and to earnestly seek God on their behalf and give them a sense of grace and mercy in their decision making that is supernatural. I don't shy away from any of that in believing that we can impact the president. But it does come down to the individual and the decisions that they make and the worldview that they have. And from my standing, we are headed in a better direction when it comes to that, with truth and kind of biblical acknowledgement. I'm not saying that Trump is a Bible believing Christian or that he's someone that everybody should be modeling their life after. I don't know. I don't know any of that.
Doesn't read his God in Our City New Testament every day.
He might be. I don't know that. And that's the point. I don't know. And I don't know the quality of that life in any of the presidents that have served in my time in covering this. But I know one thing: I can pray for them.
Yes.
And I can do that every day.
As Christians, what is the advantage for us? What's the change for us in having Trump over Biden? Is it a difference, or Trump over Kamala?
Oh, I think there's a huge difference in terms of policy. Again, in terms of who they are as people, that's kind of between them and God. I don't know that. I don't know that relationship. But in terms of policy, things that I think your listeners would be very concerned about, Kamala Harris was deeply committed to keeping the Biden gender identity kind of blackmail in schools that they outlined in the first week of their administration. And you talk about how quickly things can change. He got inaugurated in 2021, came in, and within the first week had issued an executive order saying to public schools across the country, you will provide evidence that you are providing gender identity allowance, instruction, capacity, etc., or we're going to take away the money that you use to feed kids in the morning that can't afford breakfast for themselves. Off the bat, not because there was a voter mandate, not because there were people crying out for it, but because a constituency of theirs in the what I kind of referred to as like the sexual anarchists of our time wanted them to push this through schools. And out of that, you got not only gender identity oriented curriculums, programs, etc. You then, for the first time, had schools actively letting boys into girls' locker rooms. You actively had schools allowing kids to self-identify and keep it from their parents. You had schools for the first time actually passing policies that if a teacher was caught telling a parent about a child's gender transition at school, that they would be fired. You just had this kind of all-out assault on this one idea of men and women being different, that parents they had their hands tied in terms of how they could respond to it, or so they were told. Teachers that had a conscience that knew it wasn't right, they were put in a tough situation. Did they go along to try to reform it, or did they take a stand and get fired for it? I mean, there were all kinds of consequences to just that one executive order that came down on day one in the Biden administration.
Parents being, put on a list by the FBI if they got up at a school board meeting and questioned it.
Well, not only that, if they read from a book that was in their child's library at the school that was too profane to be read in public, they would be censored by the school board and disallowed from coming back to the meetings, and they had police escort them out and everything else. If they read, hear me clearly on this, if they read from the book that was in the child's library at the kid's school, if they read from that book at the school board meeting, they would be punished.
Wow.
That's how inconsistent the policies were. And yes, they actually had operatives of the FBI targeting parents, particularly in Virginia, who were standing up at these school board meetings and calling for accountability. And our system, you talked about the peaceful transference of power. That only happens when there's accountability. When there's no accountability, there's no need to peacefully transfer power, because you can do whatever you want. And that's what's going to change big time. And it already is, since the president took his hand off the Bible earlier this morning.
I also take great heart in the fact that Mike Johnson, who is a committed follower of Christ, and Senator Thune, who's a Bible Institute of Los Angeles graduate, Biola, are running the House and the Senate. I see just a trifecta of the ability to influence things, influence culture for the kingdom of God. Am I missing something?
No, you're not. And in fact, one of the things that people in Trump's first term, if you run into theologically weak people that think that politics is in some way more significant than theology, and they start saying, but this group cares about the poor, so we should allow abortion and trans ideology and all these other things so that we can take care of the poor the way, quote, Jesus said to, versus the people that said, no, we still love the poor, we still minister to the poor, we still believe in assisting the poor, but we also believe that we should not be a culture that says, let's kill unborn children, that we should not be a culture that says, let's brainwash our children and turn them into trans activists, that weak-minded Christians with weak theology that lean onto the one side and say, no, those sins are forgivable, we just have to feed the poor. The evidence of one's faith, they would argue, is in how you deal with those social issues exclusively.
Yes.
And I think, so they would look at Trump and they would say, well, because he's a meanie in social form, he tweets harsh things and he says very direct things that maybe don't always sit well with people. And he's mocked people and he's said things I've been uncomfortable with. I'm not saying he's perfect by any means, but he does play a very hard game, particularly in campaigns and campaigning. He plays to win, and he will punch. If you punch at him, he will punch back 2 times. But their argument with Trump was, how can Christians elect Trump if he has these personality defects, or he's not particularly nice, or he's not whatever? And by the way, those people that think he's not particularly nice probably never spent any time with him. I think one of the things that blew people away in this election was the overwhelming kindness that Donald Trump really does express to people. And when he got on the garbage truck and rode it around, and when he went to McDonald's, and when he put himself in the shoes of everyday people, you had all the workers at that McDonald's that he went to were black teens, young men and women of color. He was the only white guy that had a McDonald's apron on that day. And those kids saw a president, the most powerful man on the planet, come and ask them for help on how to fry French fries. Now, what leader does that? I'm not saying he's perfect or sanctified or holy or any of that. I'm just saying there's an honesty to him that even the common man, and particularly people that work for a living, seem to relate to. And that's one of the reasons why he won by such a large margin. But in 2016, people were saying, this guy is not a Christian, nobody should support him. And yet I would say, in the 5,000 appointments that he puts around him, he had more Christians in his cabinet and in his positions than anybody else ever had. Wow.
Kevin, regretfully, our time is completely gone. It has been so nice having you. Thank you for adding so much to this day. May God continue to bless our president. May God continue to bless you and the That Kevin Show.
Thank you, Dave.
This is Pastor Dave Watson. Thanks for listening. Please join us again tomorrow for another edition of God in Our City.
Thanks for listening to God in Our City with your host, Pastor Dave Watson. We hope the show was a blessing to you. Again, To receive a downloadable gift from Pastor Dave, go to calvarychapelsi.org/GIOC. That's calvarychapelsi.org/GIOC. Please check out Pastor Dave's blog at nycshepherd.com. That's nycshepherd.com. Please invite a friend and join us every weekday for another edition of God in Our City.